Red vs. Blue Zero, an instant classic completely rejuvenating the lifeblood of this old, forgotten web series. Oh, wait a second, that wasn't right. Red vs. Blue Zero was bad. There we go. Red vs. Blue is the longest running web series of all time. We followed the journey of these idiots as they've stood around and talked, taken down an elite super soldier program through what we can only imagine as pure luck that they couldn't repeat if they tried, defended a planet from evil space pirates, and even traveled through time itself. But after 17 seasons of following this group, what other adventures are there? Are there any other adventures to be had? And most importantly, who's gonna tell these other stories? But before we can talk about Season 18, we need to talk about what came before it. The Shizno Paradox was a mixed bag with the audience. It effectively covered the entire spectrum of quality throughout its run. Season 15 was an alright entry into the franchise. It did some neat things, but equally dropped the ball on as much as it got right. Season 16 was the biggest dumpster fire the series had seen at the time and turned away many fans who were barely hanging on to their interest in the story. It was convoluted, time travel, gods who aren't gods, character development was reversed, everything was all over the place. It was a tough season to get through or even follow for that case. And Season 17 was actually surprisingly good. I mean, it had to finish off what 16 started, so it wasn't ideal, but all things considering, the writing and the characters were all pretty decent. With such a subpar arc, it sparked a conversation between fans on whether the Reds and Blues stories should continue. It was amazing how long this show lasted before it really started to feel like the characters ran their course. Granted, that was thanks to a bad concept and shoddy writing, but once everyone realized that Bernie was no longer overseeing the franchise and the series was just getting tossed around to whoever would take it, maybe it was better that instead of messing up the characters that we do know, how about we introduce new ones altogether and begin expanding the universe? Admittedly, I was a huge advocate for this idea. If there wasn't any clear direction for the Reds and Blues themselves to go, then there were still tons of other things I wanted to see. This likely in tandem with some behind-the-scenes troubles like Joel getting fired and retiring his role as Caboose, as well as Bernie moving out of the country. Red vs. Blue was getting a little difficult to work around. So with the older generation making their exit, it seemed time for the new kids to be given the franchise to play with. So what happens when you give a bunch of youngsters an IP, completely strip away what made the original, and just let them do whatever they want? You get Red vs. Blue Zero. Upon release, fans collectively looked at the Shizno Paradox and said, "You're off the hook." Much of the cast working on the series came from Death Battle, most notably Torian Crawford, who is one hell of a fight animator, but he was also the director for this season as well. And I think this came across quite clearly in the end product. I don't care what people say, the fights are absolutely amazing. You are out of your mind to think they are poorly done and choreographed. Literally look at the last arc for bad fight scenes. There was weight, there was direction, there was a clear vision for how each fight was filmed and played out. Despite the chaos, you could still follow them, and they were pretty goddamn badass. That is, unlike the rest of the season. Now the story. Red vs. Blue was always at its greatest when it never overstepped their boundaries. The story was always self-contained to this group and the things that affected them. They're fighting each other in the middle of a canyon. Project Freelancer effectively ruined their lives and it got personal. And yeah, even this civil war taking place on Chorus. When you stop and ask, why isn't someone else dealing with this? The answer is simple, because it's quite frankly not important enough for others to care about. In the grand scheme of things, the director was just another scientist. Chorus was just a forgotten planet. But viewers never really cared because everything was personal. Church had a bone to pick with his creator. Malcolm Hargrove was responsible for what was happening on Chorus. It didn't have to rely on the cliched, save the universe main characters. But once these arcs ended and new writers came along, it seemed that the only way they figured that they could raise the stakes was by having the universe be at stake. The Shizno Paradox introduced gods, and it was a terrible idea, and Red vs. Blue Zero has a very similar approach. Not with gods, but it may as well, because we are introduced to the ultimate power. The ultimate source of power in the universe. Whoever wields it will be unstoppable. Except not really. This shit sounds like the motivation for the next antagonist of Danganronpa 4, and the plot feels that way as well. It feels like you're watching an anime instead of Red vs. Blue. I did a rough edit estimation, and about 40-ish% of this 1 hour and 20-minute season is pure fight scene. That is ridiculous. Something the people working on the show were really pushing in the run-up to the season was the idea of fun. This season is gonna take you for a joyride. Sit back, relax, and enjoy what's in store. But there was one slight problem with that concept. It decided to include a plot. A completely original cast of characters fighting a new group of enemies as they search for the greatest source of ultimate power in the universe. Which, spoilers, comes from this being called Black Lotus? What is this? What are you doing? Are you gonna try and call this an AI as well? Or is it part of this narrative anime plot as its god? The worst thing is, I can think of an excuse, and maybe it was going for this. Maybe I'm about to give them an out. But perhaps it was a forerunner. Red vs. Blue has never tackled them. It's Halo lore for those of you who don't know, so don't feel too lost. I theorized ages ago that Santa was actually created by the Forerunners, so perhaps Black Lotus was intended to be one of them. But Jesus Christ, why'd you call him Black Lotus? And what sucks the most is that if this season wanted to just have fun, it could have done that in so many different ways that simultaneously pleased fans. Have Sarge create a what-if machine that simulates battles between whoever he wants. Follow short mini-stories between one of the 30 freelancers that we've never seen at some point in their careers. Or speaking of Sarge, hear me out. Here's my pitch. Have an entire episode that takes place in Sarge's past. It's a grand epic, over-the-top battle. Sarge is kicking ass, he's taking names, he's nigh unstoppable. Maybe some generic hardships along the way, as cliched and over-the-top as you can imagine if you want. But with the charm of Sarge as the hero. At the end of it all, he saves the day, he ends the war, whatever it is. Then it cuts to modern day, and Sarge is telling the story to the others. So it's like, oh, Sarge was embellishing this story. This is how he views himself. You get the cool over-the-top action, along with the fan service, and not having to deal with plot. Like, if the season just wanted to do fun, that's how it does it. It's really unfortunate that such talented fight animators were wasted on such nothing of a season. Even during the Shizno Paradox, while the story wasn't great, we could have at least had the fight between Tex and Carolina, and the two Carolinas look good. Those fights would have benefited greatly from better animators, but instead the talent was wasted on nothing characters in a bad plot. And it's likely not going to get better in the future, considering that Torian has since left Rooster Teeth and taken up a new job. I don't know if or how many other animators were involved in making these things come to life. All I know is that Torian was the main guy, so it's not looking good for future fight scenes if we ever even want them from these characters again. Some of the plot lines weren't even that bad. I was interested in East's and West's father-daughter relationship and how that would develop, and I even liked the resolution. By the final episodes, West fights her one-on-one, but he doesn't actually fight her. He lets her attack him relentlessly and is even willing to let her kill him. But she doesn't and just takes her frustrations out on him because she really doesn't want to kill him either. It's there, the points in which the plot lines lead, I like. But for God's sake, the writing in which we get there makes what can be a very emotional and impactful scene fall flat. Ideas are there, but the talent to execute on them certainly wasn't. Characters are probably one of, if not the most important aspect when it comes to Red vs. Blue. The whole foundation was built on making sure that every character was able to stand out in their own way because they all looked exactly the same. Designated personality traits were very fundamental with each new edition, and Red vs. Blue Zero kind of does that. Firstly, it establishes the characters in one of the worst ways possible, and that's just outright saying it. There's this whole montage of Carolina going through each of the characters, who they are, what their personality is like, and it just feels so wrong. This is the sort of thing you expect to see in the trailer for the run-up to the season, not in the actual show. I think the writers just didn't have enough faith in the audience to simply understand who these characters were by simply watching. Like, they had to tell the audience, this is the leader, she's super determined, this is the edgy one, watch out for her angst. But picking up on that should have been natural, and honestly it still would have been. These characters aren't all written the same, they don't all sound or talk the same. There's no need to try and tell us the personality traits of them. But even still, these characters aren't great. The weird thing is, I didn't even have a hard time accepting a new cast of characters. I actually took a liking to this group more than I did the chorus cast, and to this day, I still don't like most of them. One is incredibly boring and generic. It tries to give her the trait of competitiveness, but it doesn't know what to do with it. So instead, she acts like that one friend who takes Mario Party a bit too seriously. So it's not fun for anyone involved and really kills the mood. Now, if you're thinking, hold on a second, this personality sounds familiar, that's because it's exactly the personality trait Carolina had in her Project Freelancer days. Only that was in a good story, with good writing. And this one isn't. She's as generic as they come. East was probably my favorite and has all of the energy of an angsty teenager, which I know isn't a very popular personality trait to have. I personally really like it. It's one of the reasons why South is one of my favorites, and I would compare East to South, only East is more angstier while South is, and I say this with genuine love for her, a bitch. I get that having an attitude is a bit of an uphill climb in terms of getting the audience to like them, but I would say that at the very least it is a personality trait. The angstiness is one that we haven't really gotten. Like I said, I think South is probably the closest, and that's much more than I can say for the others. West is the Sarge of this group. He's got the rough and tumbled voice of being their leader. I liked him, but for God's sake, his acting, I quite frankly have never heard worse. Raymond is the comedic relief because this season doesn't have a lot of comedy, so when it tries, Raymond usually gets the lines. He's alright, I guess. He's definitely got the voice to pull off the character, but he just doesn't manage to stand out in any way. Axel is the weapons specialist. Never comes into play. He's straightforward. Wife, kids, he's the mentor. He's like early Wash in terms of personality. That's literally all I have to say about him. These characters aren't unbearable, but they're just very hard to care for due to how hollow they are. Their dynamics don't work either. One in East's dynamic is, oh, you're competitive? I'm competitive too. When you pair West and Raymond, they don't play off of each other well. They simply exist while doing their own thing. When Washington was introduced in Season 6, it was clear that he was a very straightforward, by-the-books guy. Comparatively to the others, he wasn't funny. Which is exactly why the first person Bernie had him recruit was Caboose. The idea of the straightforward Wash having to deal with the stupidest among them was an innately funny concept, but when a similar approach is taken with West and Raymond, Raymond just winds up talking to himself.
Let's check it out.
Let's check it out is what you say when you want to die in a scary movie. Nope, I'm good. Don't feel like dying today. We dying today. And I booked an escape room this weekend.
They don't play off of each other. Raymond is saying goofy things while West just stands there silently. The villains aren't great either. Diesel is as if they looked at the meta and thought that he was a good character because he was big and didn't talk, and they thought, hey, let's make one of those ourselves. But unlike the meta, who they established as an entity going around killing other freelancers to get their AIs so he could form the alpha, sort of innately making him a scary presence, Diesel has no motivation whatsoever, and we don't know why he's here or what he wants. He's just the big guy who doesn't talk. FaZe is probably the one who carries the season, if anyone. Her fight scenes are the most creative and entertaining, but that's thanks to her teleporting knife like she's Nyx from Final Fantasy Kingsglaive. And this kind of leads me to a tangent. Half the stuff in this season is just made up. It was a similar complaint I had during the Shizno Paradox, and this season doesn't do any better. FaZe's knife doesn't exist in Halo, neither does the super speed that East has. All of the aliens fought were just created to be shot, and even the allies were weird. What's the point of this being red versus blue if they're just gonna create entire concepts and new models just to be there? At some point, you're just making a new show, but calling it red versus blue. And finally, you have Zero, who is the most over-the-top, cliched villain you could possibly imagine. It doesn't play with it in any sort of fun way. He's written very unironically, and if it was meant to be a joke, it didn't convey that at all. The season also brought back old characters. That should be good, right? Everyone loves seeing old faces back again in the story. Well, not with this writing. Carolina, Wash, and Tucker all appear in this season, and genuinely didn't need to be. Right out of the gate, the writers really seemed to showcase what exactly it was they were capable of. Of the few things the Shizno Paradox did right and serviced, amongst them was Sister, Donut, Wash, and Carolina. The whole point of Wash's plotline is the fact that he gets shot in the neck and it causes him to have a brain injury. He becomes forgetful, seems to be a completely different person, he becomes a shell of his former self, and it was a genuinely sad sight to see this character who's gone through so much go through this and be losing. Going back in time and preventing this from happening spurred a whole series of paradoxes which stemmed from this exact moment in time. And the entire arc ends with Wash accepting his fate. He must get shot in the neck and he must suffer this brain injury. And season 17 ends with everyone agreeing to be there for him and help him.
Can you all be there with me in temple space when I get hurt again?
You got it.
We got you. 100%. We'll be there. For you. Absolutely.
Of course. I'll bring the band-aids.
For sure.
As long as it's not Tuesday between 1 and 12.
I'll be there so hard, there'll be 2 of me.
It was genuinely one of the very few things that arc did really well. So when season 18 came around, the writers showed just how capable they were. They looked at Wash and said, yeah, that whole brain injury thing, that sounds a little complicated to write around. What if we just didn't write around it? Let's just fix it, good as new.
I thought he was forced to retire because of his, brain.
1, rude, and 2, heard they fixed that a long time ago using cutting-edge robotics and old kitchen appliances. He's got superpowers now.
It happens in literally the first 30 seconds of the first episode. But you might think there's at least some sort of payoff for bringing him back. Nope. He gets his ass kicked, gets tortured, and that's it. Man, I'm really glad you brought him back. And the exact same thing happens to Tucker. To open the vault where the ultimate power lies, the villains need keys, and who do we know that has one of these alien keys? Tucker!
Oh, no.
What? What's wrong?
I don't care what West and Axel think. We have to save Lavernius Tucker.
The setup and name drop is pretty decent, but once we actually get to him, the season forgets about him just as fast. Shatter Squad arrive to protect him, and once they show up, a fight breaks out. Alright, this is the moment. Tucker is the most capable one of all of the Reds and the Blues. It's his time to shine. Just kidding. Tucker doesn't get a single fight scene. He gets taken out and thrown to the side immediately and contributes absolutely nothing. You gotta make sure you show off how cool and capable the new characters are and just how useless the old ones are, am I right? I'm convinced they animated this fight scene and someone asked, what about Tucker? So they just threw him in right at the beginning. He doesn't even talk during this whole thing. He's dead silent, like they didn't give him any lines. And when he does talk, it's wrong. One of the only lines of significance he has is his signature bow chicka bow wow line. And they messed that up.
Hey.
All right, let's go.
Worth it. Bow chicka bow wow.
Like, how does that happen? It's not even a complex joke to understand. And what follows is one of the most egregious things that's ever come out of Red versus Blue. And that's the quote-unquote killing of Tucker. Now, not only is it already an incredibly cheap writing tactic to try and emotionally invest the viewers in by pretending to kill a character, but to add on to it, the season had done such a poor job at investing us in any of the new characters that it had to resort to killing one of the originals so it would evoke any sort of emotion. The closest thing I could think of from the originals is when Wash shot Donut and Lopez, but even then, that action was purposeful. It showed that this once friendly ally was now a villain, but also to indicate that Donut wasn't actually dead, we saw the bullet go straight through him, so we know that he was injured but not dead. Lopez was a robot, so he was shot. Also, no one shouted, "Oh my god, he's dead," as they do with Tucker.
It's Tucker. He's dead.
Of course he returns in the next episode revealing that he didn't die, but Jesus Christ, I've never seen such a sad attempt to evoke a reaction from viewers. And like Wash's brain injury, there was an element of Tucker's story which got completely ignored, and that's the fact that only Tucker can use his sword. It's kind of been a major plot point throughout the series how only he is capable of turning on and off the key as he is its owner. But despite this fake death and not being dead, FaZe can use the sword. I can only imagine it was by pure accident that they mentioned Tucker flatlining for a little bit. But even the excuse of his heart stopping for even only a short time, taking his sword away and giving it to FaZe is like, what the fuck? And FaZe isn't dead, so if the writing is all of a sudden going to be consistent, she is the new owner of the sword, and Tucker is shit out of luck. 2 originals returned, and just horrible decisions were made with both of them. Carolina plays a slightly more important role, but not much of one. Most of her on-screen time is designated to being called old by one, or complimenting how amazing and capable the new characters are. There was genuinely zero reason for these characters to be in this season. It butchered 2 of them and didn't do anything special with the 3rd. I guess they had to find some excuse to call whatever this was Red vs. Blue. Red vs. Blue Zero feels like it came from people who watched the show but didn't appreciate it. We all have those franchises that we truly and wholeheartedly love. We consume as much information about it, its characters, its world, how it was made, and we come to form a genuine appreciation for it. Most shows we watch we can enjoy without having to do all of those things. But it's for those very few that we feel the need to go above and beyond. Red vs. Blue Zero feels like it was made by people who just watched the show and enjoyed it, but that's it. They thought it was funny, they enjoyed the action, and they thought the story was pretty good. But they didn't immerse themselves into it and what made it special. This season asks us to care about these new characters simply because the new writers made them and they like them. It asks you to ignore the bad writing because they wanted to have fun and not focus so much on it. But yet it decided to include a story that tries to pull off character development. Red vs. Blue Zero, quite frankly, evokes none of what made Red vs. Blue special. The characters are boring. The plot is dumb. The action is good, but is hampered due to how it was implemented. And the comedy was non-existent. If it wanted to be something new, then give it time to breathe. Allow your characters to establish themselves. Explain and flush out the plot. Action is good, but it doesn't make the story. It was a fine idea to break away from the main characters, but it failed to make it feel like it was even the same show. Anyway, that's what I think. What are your opinions on the season? Do you enjoy it? If so, please let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious. And do you want to see more of them? But until next time, thanks for watching.